going to be out for 3 to 6 weeks, and all.
I mean, listen. This is where the NFL's a little silly. This is where coaches really do pretend it's the nuclear codes. Everyone knows that Jordan Love's out this week. Now, maybe he'll be back sooner than people thought, but you are not giving yourself any edge against the Colts by being like, who knows, guys? But I mean, to me, that's silly. We know he's not playing.
Super Bowl odds dropped from plus 1,600 to plus 3,500.
They became underdogs to make the playoffs.
Ties the Packers with the Rams and, dare I say it, the flirty Bears.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah. So, are the Packers in trouble now?
Well, it depends on how long Love's out. This is obviously good news. It seems like it won't even be 4 games.
They hope they hope it's not.
Yeah, I mean, Indy, this is going to be a tough. It's winnable. Malik Willis, that's the thing. He's not good.
Yeah.
All right, and they ran the ball really well against Philly. I know they're going to try to, do that, and that's what they got to lean into. Let's run the football. Maybe see if Willis can hit some underneath stuff because they got a great receiving core. But hopefully he'll be back. So Indy, Tennessee, Minnesota. So those are 3 games you can win, right? And then it gets really rough. So he needs to be back by
Would you, Greg? I'd call Ryan Tannehill.
No, I agree with that.
Look, this is what bothers me. This is why the Packers are in this situation, because they didn't pick up the phone and call somebody. When you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, they have Patrick Mahomes. We know that.
But if he was out 3 weeks, they'd be alive in every game with Carson Wentz.
Right.
Alive.
Why? Because they prepare to sustain success. You prepare. You don't do this when you have a team and a roster that you feel like you can compete with. And so for me, the reason why they're not out. Right. But yes, they're in trouble right now in the current moment because Malik, you might conceptually have to change the identity of how you run your offense now. Because unless something drastically changes and he can throw the football now, you're going to have 4 receivers out there that are going to be looking like...
No, you just have to run the ball with Josh Jacobs.
Exactly. LaFleur must have seen something. No, so I obviously didn't think Love's going to get hurt, but why would he go after Willis?
So I have my theory on that is that they were like, hey, this is essentially a distressed asset. This is a guy some people thought was going to go in the first round. He was a relatively high draft pick. We're going to get him for nothing from Tennessee. Cool. And he's going to have a year.
You're correct.
He's going to have a year in the practice, in our meetings. He's never been around a real offensive mind in the NFL, they're probably thinking. And maybe we can get that talent out of it.
Someone raised their hand like, yeah, just quick question. Didn't the Jets just try to do that? Remember? High draft pick, kind of distressed, but they had him in the building.
Too,
don't have to worry about it.
But the Cowboys at least.
Okay. Let's listen. The Packers aren't the Cowboys. Or they're not the Cowboys, but they're not the Jets. The Jets are not a highly run organization. And they haven't been for years and years and years. The Packers are. The Packers are an incredibly highly run organization. They drafted Jordan Love when no one thought they should. They drafted Jordan Love even though Aaron Rodgers was very angry about it. And how did that age? Jordan Love's a top quarterback in the NFL now. So the Packers know what they're doing. I agree. I understand with what Greg is saying, and even Nick to that degree of like, yeah, they got Malik Willis, and you can get him for cheap, and they want him to sit for a year, yada yada yada. I do get that, but I also do believe that LaFleur was comfortable moving forward with Willis. Now, I do think it was genius of the Chiefs to go out and get Carson Wentz, because I mean Carson Wentz I think could be a legitimate starting quarterback in the NFL. And so, yeah, the Chiefs, obviously, if Mahomes went down, having Carson Wentz there would be huge. But the Chiefs would still be in trouble, right? When you're down your actual great quarterback, you're technically still in trouble. You can be in games, but you're in trouble. So, of course, the Packers are in trouble. Any starting quarterback who's actually legitimately good goes down, your team is going to be in trouble. You just are. That's just the way it works. So the question of, are the Packers in trouble? It's like, well, yeah, are they green? So it's a silly question to ask. The better question is can they win with Malik Willis? And it is a tough schedule. Listen, this was some tough games even with Jordan Love. Let me see if I can get the schedule. Okay. The Colts are a lot better than people realize. A lot better than people realize, as we saw them play against the Texans. Now, I think you could be banking on AR being hot and cold, right? Like, how consistent is he going to be? But the Colts they were a fringe playoff team, easily could have made the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew. If they get some consistency and AR continues to develop under Shane Steichen, the Colts will be they will be a legit team and not just like an easy team where you're like, oh yeah, we could win that game. The Tennessee Titans, that absolutely is that game, right? That absolutely is. And the Minnesota Vikings, I actually just did a whole thing about them, is a question mark. We have to see. They beat the Giants really good, but that's the Giants. And I know, of course, Green Bay Packers are like, no, the Vikings aren't good. The Vikings aren't good. And I think you have to just wait and see who the Vikings are. Sam Darnold played great. He was technically the second best quarterback according to PFF. Does he turn into a pumpkin? Does he regress? Was it just that he got to look good against a bad team like the Giants? Time will tell. I think the Minnesota Vikings will be competitive. So I think that'll be a winnable game no matter how Sam Darnold looks. But I think it could still be competitive. It's an interesting game. It all depends on how Malik Willis shapes up. And I'm just looking at these next 3 weeks as their games. The Rams, that should be a tough game. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray looked legit. But again, it's tough, and we don't have to go much deeper than that because I believe at that point, unless there's some pretty big setbacks, Love will be back. It's interesting because are they? Let's look at the worst case scenario. Let's say they lose to the Colts, they beat the Tennessee Titans, and they lose to the Vikings. Again, worst case scenario. I'm not saying these are my predictions at all. Okay, cannot be clear enough about that. These are not my predictions. Just saying worst case scenario. Technically, the worst case scenario is they drop all the games. And yes, if they drop 4 in a row, that's brutal, and I think it would be incredibly hard to make the playoffs at that point. But let's say they go 1-4, right? And now Jordan Love comes back in week 5, right? I think they should absolutely beat the Rams, especially if Puka Nacua is still out. They should absolutely beat the Rams. They would absolutely beat the Cardinals. The Texans, that's going to be a tough game. I think they should beat the Jaguars. Lions, tough game. Bears, they should beat the Bears. 49ers, tough game. They should beat the Dolphins. Again, Lions, tough game. They should beat Seattle. The Vikings, again, also a question mark team. They looked, not the Vikings. The Saints, they looked unbelievable against the Panthers. Who really knows what they're going to look like? Should be a winnable game unless they really did somehow right that ship and Derek Carr is a top quarterback in the NFL, like he played against the Panthers. But, unless that happens, then that should be also a winnable game and absolutely a game that Jordan Love and a healthy Packers team can beat. Vikings, now that you have Jordan Love, I think you win that game. And then the Bears, I think you should also win that game unless, again, Caleb Williams has really found his footing and he is now having a just transcendent year. Which will also be interesting because at that point, depending on how long it takes the Bears to get things going, if they don't, who knows if Caleb Williams is even in that game at that point. I mean, who really knows what that team looks like if they just don't shut down everyone or, not really play the full game. I mean, honestly, who knows? You have no idea. Maybe they're hoping to get a better draft pick. You have no idea what happens in week 18. So yeah, those would be enough games to still get into the playoffs. It's hard. And the margin of error really shrinks down, right? That Jaguars game might be a little harder of a game because Trevor Lawrence could be playing really well. You got to pull that out. When you have Jordan Love, the Texans game is going to be a really tough game. Can you get that win? In that point when you're playing the Texans, maybe losing by 3 and wouldn't have been the worst thing if you were able to get some wins together against the Colts, against the Titans, against the Vikings and the Rams early in the season. But now that week 7 game is against the Texans, you can't afford to lose by a field goal. You can't afford to miss that extra point and now lose by 1. The margin of error is just too small. You got to be ready to go. Week 12 against the 49ers. Can you make that, can you steal that? I don't want to say steal, because is it on the road? It just says verse. No, so yeah, it would be home for Green Bay, right? Can you get that win? Can you make Brock Purdy uncomfortable? Can you prove that you're the better team? I just think the margin of error just gets smaller. But even if they come away and only, start back with when Jordan Love comes back and they're say 1-4, I still think there's enough games, enough truly winnable games that if the Packers are a good team, as great as I think they are, they should absolutely win the games, right? If you have Jordan Love, even though some of these games might be tougher than initially imagined, you should beat the Rams. You should beat the Cardinals. You should beat the Jags. You should beat the Bears. You should beat the Dolphins. You should beat the Seahawks. You should beat the Vikings. Outside of some of these teams, just Kyler Murray showing out and having an MVP level season, those should be wins. right? The Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are a good team. I don't think that they're necessarily a bad team. But it looks like this is Miami. They're going to play in Green Bay. By week 13, it should be pretty cold. We know the Dolphins don't do good in that situation. So it's like that should be a game that they should be able to take advantage of and win. And again, division games are always going to be tough. The Lions, the Vikings, it doesn't matter. Those games should be hard. But again, with Jordan Love, that's when it comes out, right? Like, are you better than the Lions? Can you beat the Lions? Can you split with the Lions? Truthfully, if you can't split with the Lions, then you may not be as good as I think you are, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think a split at the very least, or if you do go down 0-2 to the Lions, it better be close games. It better be kind of these heartbreaker games where it's just like, oh my God, it was all because of this one play. So-and-so slipped. Like just one of those heartbreakers where it's like come time playoffs, it's going to be different. So I don't think we have to hit the panic button to like this intense degree. It's uncomfortable. You're a Packers fan and you're uncomfortable right now. It's totally understandable. But I don't think you have to jump to being pessimistic, right? I still think you can have optimism. It's a long season. Jordan Love will be back faster than I think people realize. And I think when he does come back, there'll be a couple things. One, he's not really, since it's the type of sprain that he is, it's not like he's really going to lose strength and a high degree of mobility. So it shouldn't be one of those things where they're going to be like, oh, he's so rusty, he doesn't trust his knee. I think also with the sprain, once you reach a level of you being healed, there's not a strong feeling of I'm going to re-injure this. There might be the times where he kind of retweaks it and it kind of maybe gets a little inflamed. But when you really tear something and you get it surgically repaired, there is a strong feeling of I can re-injure this. I could re-tear this. Every little ache and pain, every little pop and click, which your knee is going to have forever, you start to like, you feel it. And there is that sense of like, it just doesn't feel like it did before, because it won't. And you have to learn to re-trust, okay, this type of pain, this type of feeling doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It just is just how my knee is now. It's just how my body is. And that's a thing that a lot of people who have gotten seriously injured and got surgeries just have to go through. He's not going to have to go through all that with his level of injury. It just wasn't severe enough where he's now going to have to like learn to re-trust his knee, at least not to my knowledge, based off of what's being reported of the level of injury that he has. So again, the reason why I'm all saying that is that he should be able to hit the ground running. At the very least, the rust that he will have is just the fact that he hasn't played football, but I don't think he was rusty in week 1. Right? Like, I think he came out the gate. I think he looked great against the Eagles. I really do. And I think the Eagles are a really good team. So I think he looked great. He put up points. He looked comfortable. He looked confident. Him and Matt LaFleur are continuing to develop that relationship. The offensive weapons looked great. I really do. And I think we don't have to be too hard on the Packers defense, because the Eagles offense is incredibly potent. Incredibly potent. I mean, they have weapons galore. So I think this team moving forward is going to be in good shape. You got to get Jordan Love back sooner than later, of course. And I am interested to see what Malik Willis can do. The last point I'll say is that there was talks about potentially the Packers trying to trade for a quarterback, trying to get out a quarterback. Listen, I don't know. At the end of the day, I'm going to trust Matt LaFleur, because I think Matt LaFleur will be the one that says, I need a quarterback, or Malik Willis is not good enough. And although the comparison to the Jets is not necessarily the worst comparison to a degree, because the Jets did have Super Bowl aspirations, and if they did, then they should have probably had a better backup quarterback than Zach Wilson. They should have went out and got a Carson Wentz for the most part, but they obviously didn't. We could say that maybe the Packers were in the same situation because they believe that they have a Super Bowl winning roster, and they did not prepare properly enough to get a backup quarterback. I just think that Matt LaFleur would have not been comfortable with that. I just don't believe it. In a year, especially coming off a year where we saw endless starting quarterbacks go down. I mean, I think it was a record of how many backup quarterbacks, or just how many total quarterbacks were used last season. Don't quote me on that. But I just think Matt LaFleur and the Packers as a whole are just too smart for that. So they must have had some level of comfortability from Malik Willis. And we'll have to just see. Honestly, we'll have to see. It's a tough game against the Colts. It is a tough game. That's not going to be the easiest game, but I think it is possible that they can still win some games with Willis. So don't panic too hard just yet. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think the Packers are in trouble? Do you think it's time to panic? Do you think that they can still make the playoffs? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.